There is a dog breed that makes a fully grown adult male stop walking. Not because it is aggressive, not because it is threatening, because when you are standing beside one and you look up at where its head is, and you realize the top of its back is level with your hip, and its paw is the size of your face, you experience something that bypasses rational thought entirely and goes somewhere older and more animal in you. Something that says, this is not what I was expecting a dog to be. There are 10 breeds on this planet that produce that response. 10 breeds that have pushed the biological limits of what a domestic animal can be in terms of sheer physical scale. And the stories behind how they got that way, the history, the purpose, the specific demands they were bred to meet, are as extraordinary as the animals themselves. I want to tell you something before we start, though. Size alone is not what makes these breeds remarkable. Any engineer can make something big. What makes each of these 10 animals genuinely extraordinary is that alongside the scale, they retained something that smaller breeds sometimes lose in the complexity of their own personalities. They retained gentleness, a kind of measured, considered, deliberate gentleness that seems almost paradoxical in an animal of this mass. Almost, until you spend time with one and realize that gentleness in something this large is not absence of power. It is the fullest possible expression of it. Stay until number 1. Because the largest dog on this list is not the one most people name when you ask them. And the reason it holds that position is more interesting than the measurement itself. Starting at number 10, the Leonberger. If you have never seen a Leonberger in person, pictures do not prepare you. This is a breed that was developed in the mid-19th century in Leonberg, Germany, by a man named Heinrich Essig, who had a specific and arguably magnificent goal. He wanted to create a dog that looked like the lion on the town crest. He crossed St. Bernards with Newfoundlands, and later introduced Great Pyrenees into the lineage, and what emerged from that crossing was something that does indeed carry a leonine quality that photographs capture, but do not fully convey. Adult males typically stand between 28 and 31 inches at the shoulder. They weigh between 140 and 170 pounds. The coat is a thick golden to mahogany with a distinctive black mask and a mane around the neck and chest that the lion comparison earns honestly. They were bred as farm dogs, as water rescue dogs, as draft animals, and as companions for European royalty. Napoleon III owned one. The Prince of Wales owned one. Bismarck owned one. What most people do not know about Leonbergers is the temperament that accompanies this scale. They are composed in a way that larger breeds sometimes are not. Unhurried, deliberate. They occupy space with a kind of dignity that smaller breeds rarely achieve, simply because smaller breeds are not required to think carefully about every movement they make. A Leonberger moving through a room is always thinking about the room, always aware of its own dimensions relative to what surrounds it. That consideration, that physical self-awareness, produces a kind of behavioral grace that is one of the more surprising things about living alongside an animal of this size. Number 9. The Newfoundland. The Newfoundland is the reason that water rescue dogs exist as a category. This breed was developed on the island of Newfoundland off the coast of Canada, used by fishermen who needed a dog that could work in the North Atlantic and survive it, not assist with water rescue as a pleasant secondary function. Survive working in water that kills humans in minutes. Adult males weigh between 130 and 150 pounds. They stand up to 28 inches at the shoulder. The coat is thick and oily, water-resistant in a way that is not accidental, but engineered through generations of selective breeding in one of the harshest working environments a dog has ever been placed in. The webbed feet, the broad chest, the lungs that allow sustained swimming effort, the instinct to approach a struggling swimmer from behind rather than from the front to avoid being pushed under. None of these are coincidences. They are the accumulated product of a working relationship between fishermen and dogs that asked more of the animal than almost any other working tradition in dog history. There is a documented account from the early 19th century of a Newfoundland named Hairy Man, who was credited with pulling a drowning boat crew to safety after a shipwreck off the coast of Newfoundland. The account describes the dog making multiple trips into the surf, carrying a rope, in conditions that had already killed several men. Whether every detail of the account is historically precise is difficult to verify. What is not difficult to verify is that Newfoundlands were used for exactly this purpose, in exactly these conditions, for generations. The documented history of water rescue performed by this breed is extensive enough that the individual stories, even the ones impossible to fully verify, are entirely consistent with what the breed was documented to do routinely. Number 8. The Anatolian Shepherd. This is the oldest breed on this list by a significant margin. The Anatolian Shepherd has been working in the highlands of Turkey for somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years, depending on which archaeological evidence you weight most heavily. That is not a misprint. 6,000 years of working in the same landscape, performing the same function, producing the same result, with a consistency that no human engineering project has matched. The function was this: protect livestock from wolves, bears, and in some historical periods, leopards, in terrain that is cold and remote and offers no backup and no retrieval if the dog does not succeed on its own terms. Adult males stand between 28 and 32 inches. They weigh between 110 and 145 pounds. The build is designed not for maximum size, but for maximum endurance, combined with sufficient power to deter a wolf from a confrontation it could not afford to lose. Because the Anatolian Shepherd does not primarily fight predators, it deters them. The presence of an Anatolian Shepherd at the perimeter of a flock, its sheer physical scale, and the confidence with which it occupies the space around the livestock, is in most cases sufficient to make a predator. Calculate that this particular flock is not worth the cost of engagement. 6,000 years of that calculation being correct. That is the Anatolian Shepherd. Number 7. The Great Dane. The Great Dane holds a record that the other breeds on this list approach but do not take. The tallest individual dog ever recorded was a Great Dane named Zeus from Otsego, Michigan, who measured 44 inches at the shoulder and stood over 7 feet tall on his hind legs. He was verified by Guinness World Records. He was also, by all accounts from his family, a dog who was afraid of small animals and liked to be held like a puppy despite weighing 155 pounds. That combination, maximum scale and minimum ego, is characteristic of the breed in a way that continues to surprise people who encounter Great Danes for the first time. They are not imposing in their behavior. They are imposing in their physics, and they seem largely undeterred by it. The historical purpose of the Great Dane was boar hunting, which is one of the more clarifying facts about any dog breed. Wild boar are dangerous animals. They are fast and aggressive, and capable of killing a dog or a human with a single strike from their tusks. The Great Dane was bred specifically to engage and hold boar until the hunters arrived. Not to kill the boar, to hold it, which requires a very specific combination of size, speed, courage, and the capacity to sustain engagement with something that is actively trying to destroy you. The modern Great Dane is the diluted inheritor of that working history. The boar hunting is gone. What remains is an animal that physically descends from something that was genuinely fearless, and that carries that heritage in its scale even when the scale is now deployed primarily toward occupying as much of your couch as physically possible. Number 6. The Irish Wolfhound. The Irish Wolfhound is the tallest breed on this list, measured at the shoulder as a consistent breed standard rather than adesdis, an individual record. The breed standard minimum for males is 32 inches at the shoulder. Typical males range from 32 to 35. They weigh between 100 feet and 180 pounds. The name is not a metaphor. Irish wolfhounds were bred specifically to hunt wolves in Ireland, and they hunted them to extinction. The last wolf in Ireland was killed in 1786, and the Irish wolfhound population collapsed almost immediately afterward, because the function that had defined the breed for centuries had been completed so thoroughly that the breed was no longer needed for it. The population fell to critical levels by the late 19th century and was rebuilt through a dedicated breeding program by a British Army officer named Captain George Augustus Graham, who spent 30 years reconstructing a breed that had almost followed its prey into extinction. There is something worth sitting with in that history. A dog bred for a purpose so efficiently that it completed the purpose entirely, and then nearly disappeared because its reason for existing was gone. The Irish Wolfhound that exists today is a reconstruction, an approximation of the original, built from the remaining dogs and outcrossed with other large breeds to restore viability. It is a remarkable animal. It is also, in some sense, a second version of something that the first version finished. Number 5. The Caucasian Shepherd. I want to pause here for a moment because the Caucasian Shepherd occupies a different category from the other breeds on this list in one specific way. The other breeds are large. The Caucasian Shepherd is formidable. The distinction matters. Large is a measurement. Formidable is a quality. And the Caucasian Shepherd, which was bred in the mountain regions of the Caucasus to protect livestock from wolves, bears, and in some periods, human predators, was not bred to be large for any aesthetic or functional reason other than one. It needed to be able to win a confrontation with a bear a lad in the dark on the side of a mountain at altitude. Adult males can weigh between 110 and 220 pounds. They stand between 23 and 30 inches at the shoulder. The coat is massive, capable of insulating the dog in mountain winters that kill unprepared humans. The temperament is independent in a way that is fundamentally different from the other breeds here. The Caucasian Shepherd does not look to its handler for direction in a confrontation. It has been bred for thousands of years to make its own decisions in situations where the handler is not present and cannot be consulted. That independence is exactly what the working role required. It is also what makes the Caucasian Shepherd genuinely challenging for owners who are not experienced with breeds of this type. This is not a dog that settled into domesticity the way others on this list have. This is a dog that is still, in a very real sense, operating close to the edge of what we mean when we call an animal domestic. Number 4. The St. Bernard. The St. Bernard's association with alpine mountain rescue is not a marketing invention. The breed was developed at the Great St. Bernard Hospice, a monastery and traveler's refuge at an alpine pass between Switzerland and Italy at an elevation of approximately 8,000 feet. The monks at the hospice used large dogs, descended from Mastiff-type dogs, brought to the region by Roman armies, to locate and rescue travelers who had become lost or buried in avalanches on the pass. Adult males weigh between 140 and 180 pounds. They stand between 26 and 30 inches at the shoulder. The famous barrel of brandy depicted in popular imagery was a largely fictional addition to the legend, but the rescue work itself was not fictional. Barry, the most celebrated St. Bernard of the hospice, is documented to have been involved in the rescue of over 40 people during his working life in the early 19th century. His body is preserved at the Natural History Museum in Bern. What the St. Bernard developed for this work was not just size, but a specific olfactory capability combined with a behavioral instinct to locate and warm buried or incapacitated humans. The breed's ability to detect a human buried under several feet of snow, to locate them accurately enough to dig to them, and to lie on them, to share body heat, while a second dog returned to the hospice to alert the monks, was not trained into individual dogs. It was a behavioral inheritance from generations of dogs who were selected specifically because they did these things naturally. Number 3. The Tibetan Mastiff. The Tibetan Mastiff is, depending on the source and the measurement criteria, either the heaviest or the second heaviest breed on this list. It is unambiguously the most ancient Mastiff lineage, with DNA evidence suggesting the Tibetan Mastiff population branched from the ancestral domestic dog line earlier than most other large breeds. Adult males typically weigh between 160 and 180 pounds, though significantly heavier individuals have been documented. They stand between 24 and 26 inches at the shoulder, which places them shorter than several other breeds on this list, but substantially heavier relative to their height. The coat is extraordinary, a double coat of such density that the dog appears significantly larger than its actual skeletal structure. The working history is in the Himalayas, guarding monasteries and villages in conditions that the breeds developed at lower altitude and in more moderate climates were not equipped to survive. The Tibetan Mastiff is cold, adapted in a way that most dogs are not. The paws are large relative to body size, providing better traction and insulation on snow and ice. The lung capacity is higher relative to body mass than most comparable breeds, an adaptation to working at altitude where oxygen availability is reduced. In Tibet, the traditional practice was to chain Tibetan Mastiffs during the day and release them at night to guard the village perimeter. The logic was straightforward. During the day, known individuals moving through the village could be identified, and the dog's territorial response managed. At night, anything moving at the perimeter of the village was an unknown and should be treated accordingly. A dog selected over hundreds of generations for that nighttime perimeter role became exactly what you would expect such selection to produce. Number 2. The English Mastiff. The English Mastiff holds the record for the heaviest domestic dog ever verified, through a breed whose documented history goes back over 2,000 years. Caesar wrote about English Mastiffs in his account of the invasion of Britain, describing dogs that impressed Roman soldiers who were not easily impressed by dogs. The Romans imported English Mastiffs for use in gladiatorial combat and in battles. The breed that Julius Caesar was describing was not the same as the modern English Mastiff, but the lineage is continuous enough that the description carries genuine weight. Modern English Mastiff males weigh between 160 and 230 pounds as a breed standard. The heaviest individual ever recorded was named Zorba, an English Mastiff from London, who was verified at 343 pounds in 1989. 343 pounds. That is the verified weight of a domestic animal. The temperament of the English Mastiff is perhaps the most striking quality when placed against that physical reality. This is a breed that was used in warfare and in combat sports for centuries, and that is today characterized by a gentleness and a patience with people, particularly children, that consistently surprises people who meet one expecting something that matches the physical scale. The explanation offered by breed historians is that the same qualities that made the English Mastiff valuable in its working history, the ability to remain calm under pressure, to not react impulsively, to assess a situation before committing to a response, are the same qualities that express themselves as gentleness in a domestic context. What looks like controlled aggression in a working dog and what looks like patient gentleness in a companion dog come from exactly the same behavioral architecture, just applied differently. And number one, the breed that most people do not name when you ask this question. Not the Great Dane, which holds the height record for individuals, but not for consistent breed size. Not the English Mastiff, which holds the weight record for individuals, but varies considerably. The breed that holds the most consistent claim to the title of largest dog in the world, when you measure across the full population of the breed rather than relying on individual record holders, is the Great Pyrenees, crossed with Mastiff lines in some regional populations. Though the most defensible answer, when you apply consistent measurement criteria across height, weight, and build simultaneously, is the Kangal in its largest regional variants. No, the breed that sits at number one on this list for sheer consistent scale across the full population is the Boerboel, crossed in some lineages with the Caucasian Shepherd, producing animals that regularly exceed 220 pounds at heights exceeding 30 inches. But the honest answer, the one that holds up when you apply consistent international breed measurement standards rather than cherry-picked record holders, is the St. Bernard and Newfoundland type crosses that have historically produced the most consistently large individuals across verified breed populations. And the reason this matters more than the specific name is what it tells you about what size actually is in a dog. It is not one thing. It is the intersection of height and weight and build and density and bone structure and the specific demands of the environment and the work that shaped the breed. The 10 breeds on this list each arrived at their scale by a different route. Each route produced a different kind of large. Each different kind of large produced a dog that is, its own specific way, exactly what it needed to be. Tell me in the comments which breed on this list surprised you most, either because of the history or the scale, or something about them you did not expect. Subscribe if you want to keep going this deep. See you next time.